Alrighty. This is Sports for Real with Coach Hall on this Christmas Eve afternoon. Um, Ready to get that day started tomorrow so we can move on into something else called the future. Future is always great, especially when you have some great ideas and some things on the horizon. And I just can't wait for a shot at it. But as you know, this is kind of a dead period for real football. We got NFL kicking off tomorrow with some very important games out of the AFC North. You got Pittsburgh trying to redeem themselves against Kansas City. I think that game is like 4:30. That game is going to go a long way of painting a picture about what I think is going to take place in the playoffs this year. Before that, you got a Houston Texans versus Baltimore game. That's also very huge because Pittsburgh and Baltimore have identical records in the AFC North, with Pittsburgh having the tiebreaker over the Ravens due to a better conference mark. Now, just a couple games ago, Pittsburgh had a nice little lead on Baltimore, but when you think about it, Baltimore's already played the teams that Pittsburgh is battling with now. They lost to Philadelphia. Pittsburgh lost to Philadelphia. Um, Kansas City, Baltimore's already played them. Now Pittsburgh's get their shot at them. If Pittsburgh can win this game, it's pretty much put a cap on the AFC North, and that sets them up pretty strong. But if they don't, typical Pittsburgh fashion, they make it very interesting all the way to the end, and it puts Baltimore in a position to steal the division. It's happened before, and if Pittsburgh is not careful, it's going to happen again. But no matter whatever happens, both teams are going to have to play through all the way past week 18. But that's tomorrow. After that, you have the college football playoffs with some very interesting college bowl games coming. But most people, that's just side dressing. What we're really looking forward to are the quarterfinals in the college football playoffs. Before I even get to that, let's kind of go back to what took place before we got to this point. On Friday, Indiana, they didn't perform offensively. Like I told you guys before, it was a toss of the coin with me concerning Indiana. If you flip the coin, they're going to show up, and the other side say they don't. Well, I say that because when they played against Michigan, that high flying attack that they had, it slowed down a whole lot. And I think part of that was because of the name Michigan across the Wolverine shirt. Then they played Ohio State. It was right there. Then they started making mistakes right before half. I think what happened was they realized, hey, man, we playing Ohio State, and we can head up with Ohio State. And then they started making all kind of mistakes. Then once the game got out of hand, then they started to play a little bit of football. So lo and behold, what happens in the first round of the playoffs? Same kind of thing. Mr. Rourke, he throws the interception after getting the interception, and then they turn around and give up a 98-yard run for a score. That was the backbreaker, and that was very early in the game. Indiana didn't fully recover from that, but once the game got out of hand and there was not enough time for them to effectively make a comeback, what happened? They started to make some plays, and it looked like the Indiana that won 11 games during the regular season. Too late then. You got to play all the time. So, of course, people all over the place, especially in the SEC land, who feel like that at least 6 of the teams in the tournament should be from the SEC. So when that happened, what happened? You hear all over Twitter Lane Kiffin talking about how exciting the game is and blah, 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 and on it went. Okay, then the next game, you got SMU went up to Penn State. Defense for SMU was playing lights out. But on the offensive side, the quarterback had stars in his eyes. He pretty much threw that game away in the first quarter. SMU didn't have a chance, man. The man threw 2 pick sixes. They got a Penn State tried to let them back in the game. They're going to go for it on their pretty much 20-yard line. They got stuffed. So they get immediately down inside the 10-yard line. And what happens? The quarterback BSing again. He throws an interception, and that was it. Well, it was a tip pass that turned into an interception, but still, he wasn't very authoritative with his pass, and it led to the INT. And once that took place, then that's pretty much the backbreaker that took SMU out. So here you go again. Alabama felt like they should have been in the playoffs over SMU because SMU didn't really play anybody. Okay, fine, no problem. Now you get to the third game, Texas and Clemson. Clemson is right there with Texas. It was right there. This is the same team that went to war with SMU. Clemson is also the same team that got blown out by Georgia in the beginning of the season. Now you got two different looks. And SEC, who's supposed to be so dominant over everybody, why didn't Texas dominate Clemson the way that Georgia did? Well, if you look back to that game against Georgia and Clemson, that game pretty much turned in the second half. It pretty much got on an orgy of points there, and it turned against Clemson, and that stretched the lead out. That became insurmountable. But the first half, it was straight up even. And Georgia just happened to get the plays that separated, that allowed them to get that victory. Now, the thing about that is Georgia is a second half team, so it's not unusual that they would make a run in the second half. It's just that at that particular time, Clemson was just not in a good shape to deal with it. And because they couldn't deal with it, the score ballooned and they ended up blowing Clemson out. But you can see that Clemson has grown mightily since the opening game. And then when they took on SMU roared back, primarily because the quarterback played that game the same way he did against Penn State. But he pulled himself out of that to bring his team back. Well, there's no coming back this time. But the point is, the SEC, if they're so dominant, why did Texas take Clemson apart at the knees? And then we come to Ohio State and Tennessee. Meanwhile, all this noise in the background from the coaches, like even Nick Saban was going back and forth with what's the guy named from Ole Miss, Kiffin. He's going back and forth with Kiffin, and Kiffin didn't say, not Kiffin, but Saban wasn't saying anything negative about these other teams, but Kiffin, he didn't hold back. He's basically saying that SEC pretty much should have been more representative than the three teams that they got. Well, Tennessee is one of those teams that beat Alabama. Nobody second guessed them, even though they didn't have the greatest schedule in the world either. Well, come to find out, Ohio State jumped right on Tennessee, and they stayed on Tennessee. Tennessee got a couple breaks to make it look more competitive than what it was, but when they come back in the second half, they kept on whipping Tennessee, primarily because the arrogance of Tennessee. Here you are, you got these guys on the corner that can't cover the outside receiver, but yet you leave them out there to get torched, and they kept on getting torched. And when they got torched, you couldn't stop the run in the middle. It was a thorough whipping from Ohio State administered directly to Tennessee. And ever since then, I haven't heard very much from the SEC about their dominance in the sport. Yes, Georgia is still out there. Texas is still out there. But I don't think their ground is as strong as people think it is. And Notre Dame is a threat to Georgia. A lot of people think they're going to run Notre Dame off. I don't think they're going to run Notre Dame off. Texas, what are they? Arizona State, that is a threat because Arizona State can run the football. So if they think they're just going to show up and just because they're an SEC team and beat these other teams, they got another thing coming. But it's just interesting to me how everybody is so quiet now after that whipping Ohio State put on Tennessee. A lot of people didn't see that coming. Well, I didn't think that Tennessee would beat or get beat the way they did, but I thought that Tennessee had a shot. But at the same time, when you look at Tennessee's track record over the last couple of years, when they get to the big games, they don't tend to show up. They've had Georgia in competitive games where they had a chance to knock them off, but the quarterbacks just didn't show up. Well, same kind of thing against Ohio State. And add insult to injury, some of the Buckeye defenders are now saying the same things that we saw in Scout preparing for Tennessee, that's the same thing they did, even in the exact same situation. So not only do they think they're superior, they think they can keep running the same plays, giving the same looks and the same down and distance, and expect to be successful. Well, you see now that is not the case. Now, you still got your two best teams, Georgia and Texas, still out there. And like I said before, the top teams in the SEC has been better than everybody else, but I don't think that's going to be the case this year. I'm not saying that it's not going to be an SEC representative in the championship. Perhaps it will be, but they're going to have to strap it on and they're going to have to play because nobody's going to give them anything just because they're from the SEC. Gone are the days where we can say, these two teams are the best in the country, so let's just pick them and then let them play for the championship and go from there. Well, you got a 50-50 chance of winning that way. You also got a 50-50 chance for somebody to get blown out. And that has gone the way of the SEC lately. But I just think that it ain't the case anymore. And these playoffs are proving exactly what I've been saying for years. All these conferences are set up just alike. You got two or three teams at the top, you got two or three teams at the bottom, and everybody else is in the middle. If you stick all these teams in a bag and shake them up and start pulling out, and you get just what you got right now, the college football playoffs. And right now, the the dominance of the SEC, they aren't as strong as they've been at the top. So they're very vulnerable. So don't be surprised if somebody other than the SEC wins the championship. And just going back to Kiffin, he talking about Indiana and how boring the game was and all that. But here's one thing that is certain: Indiana didn't get beat by Ohio State the way Tennessee did, and that's a Big Ten team. So what do you got to say about that, Kiffin? Oh, I forgot. You got nothing else to say. And you should have never had anything to say in the first place because if you can't beat the teams you're supposed to beat, then you got nothing to cry about. Both Ole Miss and Alabama lost to teams that they should not have lost to. Vanderbilt should never beat Alabama. Ole Miss shouldn't have lost to Kentucky. So cry all you want, and the proof is right before our eyes been played out before us. So let him suck on that. So I hadn't been on in a while. Uh, been on the move. Got a little sickness I've been dealing with, but I'm bouncing back. But I've been sitting on this little talk here because I wanted to see if anybody from the SEC was going to jump out and say something different than what they've been saying the last few years. Still going to be a great playoffs. We got 7 more games, and I think it's going to be great to see it all play out. This is a first, and bringing a lot of interest for a lot of people. Speaking of college football, you also have Michael Vick taking his first head coaching job. He's just been named the head coach at Norfolk State. Norfolk State is here in the MEAC now, the same conference my school was in before they moved over to the SWAC. It's not top level college football, but it is still a great level of college football with some good competition, some great competition. But Vic, he doesn't have any coaching experience for what I understand. So what they're trying to do is do somewhat like what Deion Sanders did. He didn't have any college coaching experience, but he did have some college experience. I mean, high school experience. So he has the opportunity to put together a staff who knows what they're doing. And that's pretty much all the head coach is. You just get a guy. He's got connections. He should be able to sign a staff, and it should be out there and get very competitive in a short period of time. Especially when you add to the fact of what Teddy Bridgewater just did at his high school, at his alma mater in Miami. They just pretty much stormed through the playoffs. They did lose a couple games during the regular season, but in their particular class, with the way that high school football is structured in Florida, where you could pretty much change teams, and if there's a lot of other schools surrounding you, then they may not be happy over there. You might need a quarterback. They mix and matching and exchanging like that. It's a lot easier to build a good team in Miami With a guy like a Bridgewater, he had so many transfer requests, he had to turn them down. But in Jacksonville, they don't have as many schools as they do down there in South Florida. So one school might get the best players, but still, it's not going to match the number and quality that you're going to get when you have a lot more schools to deal with. So as long as this system stays in place, you're going to have South Florida's and the big schools in the state dominating everything because they got the population to pretty much go find the needs that they want. Um, but I'm saying this to say that the effect of guys with well-known resumes in college and pro football, they're becoming the coaches now without the experience that used to be necessary, and they're able to put teams together now with these transfer portals real quick. And the transfer portal is open. So Vick, if he can put together a staff, it's not inconceivable that Michael Vick can put together a football team that's competitive right away. Now, the last couple guys they hired at Norfolk State, they didn't do so well. But that is a tough, it's pretty much a tough conference. Even with the exit of FAMU, some of the other teams, they've stepped up and they've been very competitive. So don't think that Vic can't turn this thing around real quick. But it's interesting to see how all these people, all these schools now are turning to the big name former players to try to uh, develop their teams. And you're going to see more of that on the high school level. It's always been that way. They're always looking for somebody with the big name experience. So I'm up for a position myself, but I don't have the big name that these guys have. But as far as coaching football, I don't sit back to none of them when it comes to getting the team ready to play some football. But will I get that opportunity? Well, it all depends on who applies for the job. But if somebody with a past resume of pro sports, then I can sit on down somewhere because I'm going to get knocked off. But that's fine. At my age, I don't have time to be assistant coach for nobody and run on their schedule. I don't need it like that. So if I'm going to run it, I'm going to run it. But I'm not going to be out there being no sidekick to nobody at this point. Unless you're talking about college or pro, where the money is significant, then that's different. But to be on a level below somebody in high school, especially some younger dude, uh, the money is just not significant enough for somebody my age to even be considering something like that. We're trying to get set up for retirement, and we don't need that. We like to have it, but I don't need that. So, but I'm going to get it. I think I'm going to get it, and when I get it, I'm going to turn high school football on its head because I got some ideas nobody even thought about. So if I get it, you'll see that. But again, like I said, these other people, they look for splash names, and I may just be on the outside looking in on that. But like I said, I like to have it, but I ain't gonna cry about it. So just to recap, we heard a lot of talk from the SEC about all these different programs that shouldn't have been in the playoff. They talked about Indiana. They talked about SMU. Both those teams pretty much got whipped on both sides of the ball. Um, but it could have been an SEC team. But the SEC team, they didn't treat it like that. They treated it like, see, we should have been in there. If we were in there, it would have been a much better game. We would have been in there. We'd probably have been some upsets, so on and so on. But that didn't happen. Well, Clemson gave you a snapshot into what could happen with an SEC team when they took Texas all the way pretty much into the wire. But the point was really made when Tennessee got taken behind the woodshed by Ohio State. Like I said before, Indiana didn't get beat by Ohio State like that. Turnovers led to that. They didn't get a whole bunch of turnovers. I don't think they got any turnovers from Tennessee. Turnovers and special teams make the difference in Ohio State, Indiana. They whipped Tennessee much more thoroughly than they whipped Indiana. So this is the reason why you're not hearing anything coming from the SEC camps because they know they got whipped. And it's also par for the course. If you've been following SEC for years, like I have, they'll sit through a tight game and they'll be sitting on their hands, and then they get a break that goes that way, and all of a sudden you start hearing the chant SEC, 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 rub it into somebody's face. Well, I heard it last night heard it from the Ohio State fans. They started doing the SEC chant, and I don't think they took it very likely. They didn't like it very much up there when they started doing it. So I say, hey, if you can give it out, take it. And Ohio State made them take it. So SEC, good conference, but they got to take their lump sometimes too. And you ain't guaranteed to have nothing just because you have tight games in your conference. That doesn't mean you got the best 6 or 7 teams in the nation. That doesn't work. If you're going to have a national tournament, this is just the way it has to be. And we can't have a 20-team tournament just to satisfy you and your hurt feelings because you didn't get enough teams that you thought you should have got. So it's just funny to me. So I want to keep an eye on that kind of stuff as the playoffs go along. And for their sake, I hope that Georgia and Texas can somehow survive the second round. And then we won't have this kind of discussion next time. But if they do get whipped, best believe I'm going to be the first one to point that out to you. And is it possible? Very possible. Because those other 2 teams, they got a little playing time under their belts now, and they're going to make it very competitive as these playoffs go along. So it's just something to keep an eye out for. But as far as HBCU, congratulations to Michael Vick. We're going to see how well he does with that program, and he should be able to turn that around pretty quick because HBCU is a good conference. The MEAC was always a good conference. They didn't treat my boys well the first time we were trying to leave, and when they came back, they treated them rude again. Now they really don't like us because we packed up and left again. So that's just the way it goes. But anyway, I just want to say, uh, don't spend all your money tonight in this Christmas Eve rush. I was out doing a little bit myself, but actually kind of slow. To be honest with you, a lot of people starting to go home, so it's about time for me to get on off the streets myself. I just wanted to chime in a few minutes to talk about the SEC and what they haven't done lately. And if Georgia and Texas don't make them look good, then I don't think they're going to have much to say next time it comes to selecting these college football playoffs. So until I come up with some new information, some new topics, um, I'll catch you guys on the other side. And if I don't see you before the morning, hope you get some good gifts. Leave Santa Claus something he can work with, man. 'Cause, Santa be working hard, man. So hopefully your SEC team, maybe they can bring you some more pride back. Until then, this is Sports for Real. I'm Coach Hall. Sports for Real with Coach Hall. I catch you guys on the other side. I'm out.